which is organized by Latvian Transatlantic organization. And this is a new initiative by LATO, supported by Latvian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Latvian Ministry of Defense, that we all, Rīga Conference community, are preparing ourselves for the big event, which is going to take place this year in October. Lectures are recorded and later made public for more wider discussions. If you have questions, please write them into the chat box. And then Kristaps Celmiņš, who is one of project managers in Latvian Transatlantic organization, will collect them and then pass them to Airis Rikveilis. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce today's speaker, a good friend of mine, Airis Rikveilis, who at the present moment is working at the Secretariat General of the European Commission as a national expert. And Airis Rikveilis has a very long experience in defense and security matters, because almost all of his life he has worked in Ministry of Defense, preparing Latvia to join NATO, and also later on bringing Latvia more into the core of NATO, if I may be so ambitious in my presentation. And Airis, despite already his very long civil servant's career, is also very experienced in academic affairs. He studied in Latvia, in Estonia, in the United States, and in many other countries. He has also written a lot of interesting articles and publications, and Airis is especially present for you, if you remember, the book which was published, if I'm not mistaken, in 2008. This book was prognosis or forecast how Latvia will look in 2020. We are already 1 year beyond. And Airis wrote a very down-to-the-point article on conventional forces in Europe, predicting that most probably we could face a new arms race and the existing arms regime would fall apart. And you were really very much precise in your prognosis. Another one point, Airis, you probably don't know, but this is the most read book produced by the Department of Political Science in Latvia. So despite a little bit of populistic approach presented in this book, it's still very, very urgent. So without any further ado, I will pass floor to Airis Rikveilis. And today's topic is strategic compass, which is the new wording in Brussels. And we would like to learn more, what does it mean, and whether it really leads to strategic autonomy of the European Union. So Airis, please, floor is yours.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Sigita and LATO, for organizing this event, and particularly thanks, Jonathan, for these warm words of welcome. Indeed, I would be much more happier if you would say how utterly wrong I was in 2007 and 2008 when we talked about conventional arms treaty, particularly conventional forces Europe treaty. But of course, reality was seen then, and it manifests itself today. So that is particularly, I think, one of the reasons why we see the importance of the debate like the one on strategic compass today, because not only NATO is growing in its importance, also the European Union. Let me thank LATO for organizing this, and I think this is certainly good to be back with this discussion with the academic colleagues on this issue. And thanks to everyone, certainly, who has found the time to listen in and discussing this very important current development in the European Union security and defense. If you take a look around the European capitals, these and similar events are organized by think tanks on an almost daily basis, and they are taking place everywhere. Discussions on strategic compass slowly taking pace, and it is timely to debate it not only in Brussels, but also in Riga. And I'm glad that LATO has traditionally, as it always has been, an organization which works on most important points in the upcoming security and defense agenda, is a great platform to discuss it. And I would pin down that I am absolutely sure that this is one guaranteed panel in the Riga Conference later this year. One important remark, as traditionally as we do, all thoughts and ideas expressed by myself here are my own, and they shouldn't be attributed to the Ministry of Defense, whose official I am, or the European Commission, where I, as a national expert, currently deal with several defense initiatives. So straight to the point, I shall cover the points regarding the need for the strategic compass, its preliminary list of content, some milestones in the run-up towards its finalization in the first half of 2022, and then I shall be ready to answer the questions. So why strategic compass? Why now? If you recall, then in 2016, the EU adopted the global strategy agreed by the Council in November 2016, the level of ambition, and set out also out 3 strategic priorities: responding effectively to conflicts and crises, capability building of partners, and protecting the Union and its citizens. By 2020, the Council tasked the High Representative in close cooperation with the Member States to develop the strategic compass, which will enhance and guide, I'm quoting now, enhance and guide the implementation of the level of ambition agreed in November 2016 in the context of the EU global strategy. It could further contribute to develop the common European security and defense culture informed by our shared values and objectives, and which respects the specific character of the security and defense policies of the member states. So what happened over those 4 or 5 years is, of course, this need and enhancing and guiding of the implementation of level of ambition is now determined by 3 factors, in my opinion. First of all, what happened over those last 4 or 5 years is development of various EU defense initiatives since the global strategy was adopted. First, coordinated annual review on defense, so-called CARD, approved by the Council in May 2017. PESCO, established by the Council decision on December 2017. Military mobility, with the adoption of the joint communication in November 2017. European Defence Fund and its precursor programs established in 2017. And I would also add 2 additional elements: the military planning and conduct capability established in June 2017, and civilian compact for CSDP later on. So all these initiatives and programs have been established with the view that we need to enhance and strengthen the European defense efforts. And of course, the first and foremost, the question is, how does it relate to NATO? And of course, we see that EU-NATO cooperation under the EU-NATO joint declarations signed, 2 declarations signed in summer 2016 and 2018, together define 10 areas of cooperation under and 74 common actions that have been initiated. And this is an integral pillar. I consider that as an integral pillar and very much a key political enabler of the EU progress in security and defense. So it has been acknowledged that all of these initiatives need to work in coherence, and a lot of effort has been put to make it work. Certainly, the higher level attention to all of these activities must be ensured, and that is acknowledged also by PESCO strategic review, as well as by CARD report at the end of the last year. But let's take a look. There are a lot of developments in these activities, right? Council decision, for example, on third states' participation in PESCO projects opens a lot of new possibilities for cooperation, particularly with the very, very important partners such as United States, Canada, Norway, now also UK. CARD findings point to great potential in the defense cooperation between member states. Decision to fund the military mobility dual-use projects under new 1.69 billion euros in the current multi-annual financial framework, as well as successful link between PESCO projects and the European Defence Industrial Program, shows you in a very concentrated form how many activities are currently ongoing, and their efficient application indeed has a huge potential in terms of impacting the fragmented EU defense efforts, including its defense industry. Another factor is, of course, evolving security situation. In many cases, and here again to the Jeanette's initial point on deteriorating rules-based world order that requires from us more precise vision regarding the operational efforts of the EU, as well as more clarity regarding the capability development, as well as growing attention to the issues on resilience, both at the EU level and in terms of partner resilience. In the previous years, the European Union mostly concentrated on partners' resilience. Currently, this understanding is, of course, that we need to change this pretty much. Partners' resilience remains important, but our own resilience efforts should be enhanced. Basically, this is an exercise to understand who is doing what, how member states and the EU institutions can interact in these areas, and do we have all the necessary policies and instruments at hand. Finally, I think the third point that actually determines the need for a strategic compass is need for more calibrated partnership efforts. Developments such as Brexit, which in itself significantly changed, alters the security and defense efforts in the EU, as well as most recently the new United States administration is also changing the EU-US relations and EU and transatlantic dynamic positively, hopefully, and countries, as I mentioned, Norway and Canada are, of course, of paramount importance, but not only. I mean, we need to take a look on partnerships in a broad spectrum, and need to understand what is that works, what is that needs to be changed, and how we do it. All of this should determine the streamlined effort for the time period of next 5 to 10 years, be cyclic, with the member states in the driver's seat, as it is common to say here in Brussels, and to determine the aims and goals as well as overall ambition of the exercise. What is strategic compass and what it is not? The strategic compass is based on first EU-wide threat analysis, and it aims at providing commonly agreed political priorities to address defense and security challenges throughout this decade. The threat analysis is, of course, a classified document, so it makes certainly impossible for us to discuss it here, but it is so far an unprecedented effort in the European Union, remarkable undertaking by inputs of more than 40 EU civilian and military intelligence services, and agreed by these institutions and presented to the member states by the EU Single Intelligence
Airis, we don't hear you.
You don't hear me?
Now you are back.
Okay. I think I missed then one sentence, and that was I think due to my phone ring. Before Christmas 2020, member states have contributed their vision on what should be discussed as part of the strategic compass. And as a result of that, European Union Action Service, with the involvement of the Commission and the European Defence Agency, drafted a scoping paper, which is a outline of strategic compass, upcoming debates and the main topics thereof. These ideas, as I said, will constitute initial frame of so-called strategic dialogue phase during the first half of 2021. We can say it started, it should have been kind of yesterday discussed also in Foreign Affairs Council, but due to other developments, debate on strategic compass was postponed. So, but anyway, the strategic phase started. They call spectrum of has been put by the member states in this paper. By no guidance by the member states, there will be a first draft of the strategic compass prepared, which will be presented to the ministers by the High Representative, and the Defense Agency will be closely associated with appropriate efforts throughout this process. And then we'll see how does that work, but let's hope that in the first half of the next year during the French presidency, this should be adopted. What's inside in the structure of strategic compass? As it stands now, there will be 2 chapters within the document. One kind of more general part, or political chapeau, with the main political objectives that should be outlined. Solidarity amongst the member states certainly stands high on the list. Again, let me reiterate, this is a member states driven process. Member states are in lead, and therefore we will see what could be made out of the current kind of enthusiasm of these debates, and particularly if we talk about today's question, very provocative question, I think, whether that is going to lead to strategic autonomy. When, of course, how do the member states see the necessity to act autonomously whenever necessary, and strengthen cooperation with partners wherever possible. In a similar vein, another political statement on the notion that strategic compass contributes to the development of common European security and defense culture is also very important. I think we are spending a lot of time here in Brussels to debate these things. Not necessarily they have direct impact on capability development or resilience, but certainly from the political perspective, these debates are important, even though not always kind of maybe with a very, very practical results. But of course, also it is important that this part of the document also talks about more general principles, such as rules-based order with multilateralism, EU's integrated approach, civil-military cooperation, international law. I think all of these things need to be mentioned, because we are the organization, I mean, the European Union is the organization which protects these rules-based order and multilateralism, and we cannot, I think, imagine European Union functioning outside this realm, and that is a very important factor. Strategic compass should also set the regular EU threat assessment process, which would certainly help to maintain this 360-degree approach to the European security, enhance the EU situational awareness, as well as highlight the foresight function regarding longer-term trends that drive security and defense needs and priorities, such as supply chains, technologies, resources, space implications for climate change, and etc. The second part, or more operational proposals, I'm going to go through them, are organized in 4 areas or 4 baskets. crisis management, resilience, and capabilities and partnership. And I think this is the third time I'm reiterating that this is a member states-driven process, and therefore it is up to the member states how actionable will these proposals and discussions become, and how ambitious the implementation of these proposals will be. But certainly, the more clarity we can afford, the more efficiency and more result will stem out of the process. And at the end of the day, this document is intended to be agreed by all. Ambition is certainly very high currently, and we will see what actual compromise is bringing. So now on 4 baskets. As I said, I will not go through each and every aspect of baskets. I think that there were a lot of proposals submitted by the member states, and I personally see that as one of the challenges of dealing with the document that already at this stage is containing so broad spectrum of proposals, and we are just in the very early stages of discussions. Experience shows that this will only grow. So certainly a lot of kind of, if I may say so, intellectual discipline will be necessary for keeping strategic compass from becoming a strategic Christmas tree. But some highlights nevertheless. The first basket, in terms of crisis management, of course, we need to look on these ways how the European Union is becoming more capable and effective crisis responder and security provider. The authors of the scoping paper have chosen a slight change, or maybe not that slight change, but instead of talking of arch of insecurity that was kind of previous Brussels language on surrounding realm of the European Union and NATO for the same sake, they have chosen to use the wording of working towards security belt around Europe, which then would define political interest for interventions. Well, traditional problem with crisis management and the European Union involvement is, of course, the force generation of the forces, and in this sense, we need to debate whether there are possible ways of mitigation of this problem through certain incentives for generation and deployment. Certainly, one of the things that needs to be debated is also speed of decision making. We lose a lot of efficiency if we are not able to take decisions swiftly when needed the most. And I think that is kind of tautology, but nevertheless, again, here in Brussels, everybody understands that we need to take these decisions timely and swiftly, but not always it is possible. And of course, we need to explore ways to enhance links between European ad hoc operations and CSDP. There is this Article 44 in the Treaty of the European Union that envisages the possibility of basically using the coalitions of willing and the groups of member states which Council can task certain duties, which actually is returned back to 2013 and 2015, where that debate already happened and ended up without any certain results. There was no need at the time. There is need now to debate this and to understand. Of course, the increased responsiveness and operational readiness. You see, the paradox of today's operations, also in the at the European Union scale, is that if we, the European Union, do not act in certain situations or do not put our boots on the ground, then to be blunt, some others are just being ready to do that immediately. So there is really a vacuum of power in any of the regions in our neighborhood. And that actually brings us to the discussion on how much do we need to do? Do we need to further develop EU military planning and conduct capability? What should we do with this? What structure, if any, should be further developed? and should that be military or civil military in nature? Or let's say, should we, as some member states have already proposed, to think about, say, some kind of generic advanced planning for operations and how to further develop required capacities for civilian and military rapid response. The famous problem with the European Union battle groups, then development of responsiveness capacity, and so on and so on. And finally, that of course brings us back to the need for regular exercises and discussions on conducting live exercises as well. So all of that certainly goes into the single set of forces discussion, which means that all contributions that the member states have need to be looked through different international organization commitments, and these commitments certainly need to be taken into account. Second basket, resilience. I think that's the most complex and also most popular basket. If you take a look on the member states' proposals, the number of proposals was disproportionately bigger in resilience basket than any other baskets. That simply shows you where what actually is the most pressing issue in the capitals. And here we have a kind of novelty, I think, in this whole strategic thinking, which is the need for secure access to global commons, including cyber, maritime, and space. I think that strengthening maritime security, being stronger maritime security actor, strengthening cyber efforts, and actually developing the role in space is, I think, something that European Union needs to further pursue. At the end of the day, like in older times where states were pretty much busy with ensuring that free trade happens over high seas and these routes are kept free, we also have other realms and other domains that we need to ensure that they remain accessible for us at all times. And certainly cyber and space are frontrunners in this in this regard. We need to access our strategic vulnerabilities in security and defense. Well, here is the interesting thing, that we have a lot of instruments, and not all of them are kind of problematic. We have a lot of instruments created for preventing and countering hybrid threats. Let's say we have thought very much on how to enhance our economic security and protect critical infrastructure by developing different synergies with the Commission instruments. But at the same time, of course, security of communication and information amongst EU institutions and with member states is an important one. If we take a look, for example, that we still have a hardship to link the secure communication lines, just organize, let's say, meetings on a more classified level. Just, I mean, it's very important that we do these things and invest in that, because COVID showed very clearly that we are doing a lot of things by cyber networks, and these networks not always are very well protected. So we need to assess our strategic vulnerabilities and certainly enhance resilience in these issues. Another thing on resilience part is certainly understanding better how mutual assistance and solidarity amongst the member states is working, and implement lessons identified from the Article 42.7 scenario-based exercises and linkages with Article 222 of Treaty of Functioning of the European Union is important. Last year in June, it was already agreed by the Council that there will be continuation of building of common understanding of this of this problem. Of course, we have also seen that member states agreed that this may also include an assessment by the relevant services of the type of assistance that could be provided, and the linkages, as I said, with the institutions' involvement. That was discussed also in the Political Security Committee earlier in January. And of course, goes without saying, the military assistance to the civilian authorities, particularly in light of pandemics such as COVID-19, humanitarian aid, disaster relief, evacuations, and so on, very, very much important. In other words, the need to reduce dependencies is growing, and we certainly need to produce more, to store more, be able to move faster, and certainly access any real material need that is, as I said, becoming paramount to our security. Third basket, capabilities. Well, pretty much many of those initiatives developed in the aftermath of EU global strategy deal with capabilities, but at the same time, I think we need to take a look and to understand how to balance the short-term needs, these shortfalls, and to mitigate capability shortfalls, as well as long-term need to develop cutting-edge technologies. In other words, buying what's available is not the most promising option at this moment. What we need is actually buying what is necessary. And the stake is high here. I think from one side, we need to have to fill what is currently missing, but we cannot allow ourselves risk the future development by either losing advantage to our strategic competitors or missing interoperability with our partners, as it was stated by the EDA chief executive recently. On military mobility, I think military mobility also has reached its first important milestone. We are currently in a situation where money has been allocated. Now we need to finalize the regulation and move to the next steps to implementation, to work on infrastructure, and to start to implement military mobility to become an important factor for enabling our capabilities. Of course, deepening defense cooperation amongst the member states through PESCO and CARD is kind of logical, but at the same time, I think it needs to be duly considered that it is already a success story, I think, at least for PESCO. If you take a look at 10 PESCO projects have been awarded the Commission funding, and PESCO projects actually secured almost 80% of the whole funding allocated in the first European Defense Industrial Development Program calls in 2020. Then, of course, I think it's a good start. Whether PESCO projects can continue to produce such a success remains a question, but at least it's a good start. On the coordinated annual review of defense side, which has just finished its first full cycle, I think the final document actually, which is actually the public information, you can all read it, identifies more than 100 cooperation opportunities amongst the member states in 6 focus areas. And one of them, just one of them, I mean, I will not mention all of them. All of them are interesting, but the one on soldier system, for example, envisages cooperation possibilities in areas such as soldier protection, small arms, night vision systems, individual CBRN protection, namely broad possibilities for engagement in terms of development, testing, etc. And this cooperation could certainly contribute to greater interoperability of our military and also make sure we spend more together more effectively. And that momentum is certainly there. Defense spending is growing, and if applied smartly, we will be indeed giving more impact by about 2025. So this all goes with the discussion on promotion of technological sovereignty and innovation. We need to be mindful on the impact of emerging technologies to ensure that new and disruptive technologies could be applied and used across the European Union and increase the EU resilience. on last Friday, in the discussion organized by the EU Institute of Security Studies, it was stated by several speakers actually that technological development cycles are accelerating and the technological costs are increasing. I would add, though, that the costs of absence of technology are growing even faster. So we therefore need to further study, for example, an impact of artificial intelligence in security and defense, implications of automated systems for future CSDP missions and operations. That, of course, brings in mind drones, but certainly not only. But there is more to that. We also need to be aware of work on the new materials, hypersonic technologies, biotechnologies, etc. If we add the link to the climate and defense, to the need for energy efficiency, innovative technological solutions, we see how complex this landscape actually is. And we need to add to all of this also clear link with the defense industry, which is paramount, I think, for overall success. So one last factor in this basket is certainly security of supply. But the member states would like to see this as a part of capability development or part of resilience remains to be seen. But again, as there are many components to this, then starting with access to raw materials, transport routes, industrial capacities, and ability to act in different security conditions, it certainly requires more complex look into the issue. And finally, fourth basket, partnerships. Well, it I think goes without saying that if we talk about partnerships, there are kind of traditional line of those who are mentioned: the United Nations, NATO, OSCE, African Union, ASEAN, ECOWAS, G5 Sahel, etc. On NATO, I think the most prominent one, the cooperation is vital in many senses, indispensable. Our colleague Klaus Wittmann, before we started, already mentioned that the process of strategic compass and NATO reflection 2030 are going hand in hand, and certainly could profit from exchanging the views and certainly in a way kind of comparing the notes, if I may say so. This current trend of cooperation between the European Union and NATO is, to me, a growing one. I see it in a positive light. Let me just attest to what I have seen on my own. The cooperation between the EU and NATO on the military mobility, one of those flagship projects, has been, I don't have no other words as simply use the word great. A stronger EU role in defense can and should go hand in hand with the stronger NATO and stronger relations between EU and NATO. And to me personally, there are no contradiction between two. I mean, the Union has organize it in a way that the coherence and mutual reinforcement with NATO policies is very much there. The EU capability development priorities are coherent with those of the NATO defense planning process. At the project level, new proposals are screened for any overlap with existing projects, including on the NATO side, and capability gaps are those of the European countries, actually, not particularly those uniquely for the European Union. So, and 38 out of 46 collaborative PESCO projects are also addressing NATO priorities. So, On organization side, I think it's clear with the third countries already I mentioned the UK, Norway, Canada, United States. We could take a look cooperation in specific thematic sectors, cyber, hybrid, maritime, and so on. Participation in the CSDP missions and operations would here greatly also benefit. And let me conclude this basket with saying that, of course, we have also a new tool here to take a look on enabling and supporting partners in dealing with security issues by themselves, and that brings me to the European Peace Facility that is on its kind of final stage of development before it could start to work hopefully this year. So this is why Compass should define these policy orientations, specific goals and objectives as called by the Council conclusions in 2020. So now I think that the idea let me say so that interesting. I also found it interesting the choosing of the name of Compass. I fully credit that to the German authorities before their presidency. But I think it is interesting to see how Compass actually helps us to understand better what we are talking about. This idea was also expressed by Elena Lazarou from the European Parliament Research Service in one of the recent events, where she said that the capabilities will have determined missions that we undertake, or let's say the state of our resilience in many ways leads us to seek the partners where we are interested. So, which means that each basket kind of points to the position of the other basket, and I think it is very important that we orient ourselves how we develop these things, not only private manner, but also in a close coordination. So now, finally, to the answer on the question that Janet asked in the beginning, will this lead to the strategic autonomy of the European Union? The answer depends on how one considers and defines the matter. The document itself certainly is not going to neither stipulate what it is, nor how we are going to achieve it. Global strategy in 2016 called for an appropriate level of ambition and strategic autonomy. In various council conclusions later on, the language on the EU capacity to act autonomously when and where necessary and with partners wherever possible has been constantly maintained. And in council conclusions of June 2020, strategic autonomy is used in terms of operational engagement. Interpretations, therefore, of this term are various. And nevertheless, consensus seems far from being within reach. To me, this all goes into two aspects: sufficient capabilities and the ability to take the necessary and timely decisions. In order to speak about the ability to act autonomously, we need tools and means to do so. And currently, I think we are fairly far away from this situation as far as the EU level of ambition is concerned. So discussions on strategic autonomy, if not underpinned by strong capability development, risks to become theological at best or very much ideological at worst. What matters currently is an effective decision, so I think then politically endorsed and fully resourced. And I would say certainly systematic implementation of capability development priorities, enhance defense cooperation and whole complexity of the defense initiatives. Then, bearing in mind that all member states will hardly agree on all priorities, we need to make Compass effective driver for making this capability development efficient enough, so that in some of the next iterations of the strategic compass, we may be will be able to see and recognize what actually autonomous action can bring, and based on that to reach the consensus on the notion of the term. A couple of sentences on what does it mean for Latvia. I think that out of all issues on the plate on strategic compass, I would distinguish the issues of security of supply, countering disinformation, and particularly attribution thereof, as well as link between 42.7 and Article 32. No doubt, military mobility remains a flagship project which strongly links our interests in both NATO and the EU. And I think on that one, as I said, we have all preconditions for success. And strategic dialogue phase is certainly an option for everybody, not only government institutions, but also academic ones. And for students, it represents certainly a broad opportunities for research and thinking what could be done for Latvian and Baltic security in complementarity of the NATO and the EU efforts. I think I'll stop here. If there are questions, I'm certainly ready to answer. But I think I tried to highlight the whole complexity of the issue that we are currently dealing with, and certainly I don't envy those colleagues who will need to negotiate that in the council building. Janet.
Yes, thank you, Ari, very much. So much information, and your lecture was so rich with different points that already along the lines of your lectures, there were questions coming in, and I had already mine as well. But before I pass floor to Kristaps, just a little bit to frame our next part of the discussion. So our total time for the discussion is an hour. We could take 5 minutes extra because of different miscellaneous consequences. So probably I would like to start with my question, and then I will pass floor to Kristaps. So my question would be related to member states. You already mentioned that the whole process is driven by member states. Could you please a little bit categorize? Are there the ones who are drivers? Because we all know that France, particularly Macron's France now, is very much supporting different defense-related initiatives. And are there countries which are reluctant because of their positions? It's possible, there is a possibility, I don't think that it will happen, but to some extent, countries which are reluctant to more coherent, more cooperative and more united defense actions. Very, very shortly, Ari, could you please give a picture of those member state positions?
Yes. If I may say so, ambition, I've seen those proposals that came in for scoping paper, for example, and you can see that there are a lot of willingness for moving certain things forward. The thing is that let's say on cooperation basket, there were almost all member states submitted certain proposals. The thing is that for those people who need to sort it out, what that means, the kind of all of those proposals lacked any kind of concrecy. I mean, they were also general. Let's say everybody wants to enhance the EU-NATO relationship. Well, what exactly do you want to enhance? And that is, I think, currently at this stage of debate, this goes throughout the whole discussion, that a lot of proposals are coming in, but really they are very concrete. There are, though, proposals from countries that you mentioned, such as France, for example, who very clearly wants to pursue certain actions. France was, for example, very much interested in this further exploring of Article 44 of these coalitions of willing in the CSDP operations. So I would say everybody is willing to do something in certain areas, but currently these areas are very much only highlighted. And I can understand. I mean, this, as I said, this document needs to be agreed in consensus, which means that after the strategic dialogue phase, there will be a drafting phase. And I think there we will see the real proposals and real interests of countries. So my answer is that there is a lot currently on the table. I wouldn't say that there are currently member states who would come with nothing. Everybody comes with something. But as I said, we need to discuss this particular issue of yours, and I very much know where it comes from the understanding that there are two different member states in the European Union: those who actually are more proactive in the EU foreign policy or common security and defense policy, and those who are less active. No, everybody came with something, but these ideas are very generic. Sorry.
Thank you. And now I will pass forward to Kristaps for bringing in questions which are in our chat box, but also there are those who are watching our lecture on Facebook and questions coming also via Facebook. Please, Kristaps.
Yes, thank you. And I will begin with the first question from Mr. Klaus. And the question is...
Kristaps, please louder. We don't hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. The first question is coming from Mr. Klaus Withman, and the question is, does not the term strategic autonomy continue to create misunderstandings?
Well, it continues to create different interpretations. I would say so. Well, everybody indeed understands that differently. You have traditional kind of understanding that we need to be autonomous on our actions, so that we can kind of decide what we want to do. But then, of course, the question is whether we have a balanced approach to these actions with partners whenever possible, and on our own when really needed. What are those situations that we should be asked to act on our own? Everybody can interpret in its own way. But as I said, we will not have any whatsoever possibility to act on our own if we will not have a capabilities to do so, and strong ability to decide on these things. So I would say, if you ask strongly my prediction, I would say that maybe we are not yet at the phase where we have a similar understanding amongst all 27 members of the European Union. What does that term mean? And certainly this debate, as I said, if we concentrate on the debate per se, might carry pretty much an ideological kind of problem. So my expert's opinion will be that we better concentrate on capability development rather than debating the term at this stage.
Yes, thank you. And I will continue with the second question from Ms. Elina Egle. The question is as follows. There are so many homeworks for EU member states to fulfill the defense capability gaps. Would there be some measurables to reach the results step by step?
Thanks, Elina, for this question, and thanks, Klaus, for your question earlier on as well. I would say on Elina's question, that comes back to my point that we need to be finding a balance between shortfall at this stage and a kind of short-term goal to mitigate those shortfalls in the capabilities that exist, and those long-term vision of capability development. I would say, as you can imagine, the capability development cannot be one-sided. I mean, you cannot put all eggs in one basket and start to mitigate shortfalls of today and then disregard technological developments of tomorrow. And of course, vice versa. So measurement is very simple. I mean, we need to understand what operations we need to undertake, and then take a look what do we have. But I would say that in terms of the European Union assistance to these capability developments, it will be very interesting to see in terms of strategic compass where member states are going to put their emphasis. Because if you just take a look on the needs to understand how we are going to utilize artificial intelligence, unmanned systems, new materials, energy efficiency, and all of that actually awaits us in next 20, 30 years. One may say, okay, why don't we kind of decide to which degree we are using the European Union, particularly in terms of research and development, and then stemming out of that, the capability development, particularly for this long-term vision. But as I said, again, I need to reiterate that this is a member state's decision. It's certainly very interesting to see, particularly for the Commission, I think, which yesterday, by the way, adopted the Synergies action plan that will exactly talk about this ability for cross-fertilization from the civilian technologies into the military, and the military technologies into the civilian.
Yes, thank you. And I will go on to the next question from Mr. Hamid Ladjevardi. He says, final document by 2022, implementation by 2024. According to reports, how will the funding of this plan take place? Who and in what proportion will costs be distributed, and will that increase national defense expenditures? How to ensure everyone will meet their commitments? And as an example, he gives Germany is way behind its 2014 commitment made in NATO Wales meeting.
Yeah, if I would have an answer to those questions, I think I would be a millionaire. But thanks for the question. I think very pertinent questions. The thing is that if the compass itself is going to be precise and set the clear goals for implementation, then I think we will return to that in about 5 years, and then we'll see. But current trend in defense spending certainly says to us that if we continue to apply to a certain degree a prudent cooperation between the European Union member states, coupled with the efforts by European Defence Fund, then certainly by 2025, 2027, so to say, this 5-7 years period, we should start to see a changes in this collaborative landscape and then defense capabilities landscape. What does that mean? I am not that fond to talk about, let's say, fragmentation. Fragmentation exists, but there are a lot of aspects to fragmentation. To me, it is important that the member states put together efforts where that is reasonable. I mean, development of those long-term technological advancements, I think, is something that would make a lot of sense. I mean, short-term mitigation of shortfalls is very much possible by national efforts, but let's say in the longer term, there's no way that we are going to tackle any longer term challenges without more collaboration at the EU level.
Okay, thank you. And I will continue with the next question from Ms. Emily Ponzoita Galois, which is, would European cooperation in research and development and defense capability development envisage cooperation with the United States?
Yeah, thanks for this question. I think the cooperation is is envisaged, is ensured. I mean, that this is no doubt. I think we will see how let's say council decision on third states participation in PESCO projects are going to materialize, but I think there is a good prospect for the United States to be involved in all of that. The thing is that we need to understand what instrument is meant for what purpose. The European Defense Fund is primarily an industrial development program, and that program is for the European industries predominantly. It does not include, also in its current form, it does not include any third state from participation if the industry of European ownership is in lead. But certainly cooperation with between European Union and United States is much broader than that. I mean, of course we are cooperating also now, and we will cooperate on many issues. I would say the thing is that twofold situation here is important to understand that from one side we are indispensable partners, but of course on industrial side we are also competitors, and that is something that needs to be taken account. Cooperation is always possible, but in terms of the European Defense Fund, at least that is a program that first and foremost supports the European defense industry.
Thank you for the answer. And I will finish with the last question from Mr. Hamid. The question is there a balance and fair mechanism for reconciling different threat perceptions? France and Germany are less concerned with potential Russian threat and more concerned with Islamist threats.
Yeah, I think everybody has a voice around the table in these matters. And I think that threat assessment has done a great job in this regard, particularly in the context of the strategic compass. Well, how to say? I think whenever it comes to Russia, Russia is always helping the Baltic states and Poland, so to say, to reveal its nature, and that nature has never lost 15 years. Again, if I come back to the Janeta's first point on Conventional Forces Europe Treaty, I think I mentioned it there that it is inherent in Russia's kind of do these things without even what they are doing on a global scale. So to me, the understanding of what Russia is and what Russia is for the European defense and security is also, I think, growing. It is growing in Brussels immensely, and in that sense, of course, the recent developments around HRVP visit in Moscow only showed that indeed Russia is on the same course as Russia always was, and for that matter, reconciling. This is not a conversation about reconciling different interests. I think, as I said, everybody has a voice around that table, and people see threat perceptions differently, and that is normal. I mean, we are a organization of rich backgrounds and rich cultural and security concerns. So from that perspective, the question is only how to make it in the rhetoric, in the political language, in the decisions, comprehensive enough and at the same time effective enough for the subsequent implementation. I don't think that you would find anybody in in Paris who would not consider Russia an important kind of challenge or threat to the current rules-based order, as you will not find, I think, anybody in the Baltic capitals who wouldn't understand how important is the southern neighborhood for the European security. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Airis. We reached the final point of today's lecture and conversation. Still questions coming in, but we do not have time to answer all of them. However, I would like to read one question, which is very important, I think, for all those who are representing security community on European level. And the question is as follows. So what is more in interest of the Baltic states, more France and Germany, even with its position on Russia for Europe, or more United States in Europe, or vice versa? I think
can I answer that very quickly?
Okay.
I think it's not either or, it's and. And I think this is how we need to, I think, to look on the developments of these European defense initiatives. This is not either or. This is not either Europe or NATO. This is Europe and NATO, or NATO and Europe. It depends on your taste. There is no priority to me between those two organizations. But for Latvia and the Baltic states in general, I have always considered, and I still maintain that this airplane has two wings, and you cannot take one wing EU out or another wing NATO out, because that airplane is not going to fly. So to me, this is win for both, and not either or.
Thank you, Airis. Thank you for a very optimistic note in the end on a very still unclear and quite contesting concept of strategic concept. But as you mentioned yourself, for so many countries in Europe, 27, the process itself is of huge relevance, because how you can in the end reach at least coherent position if you do not discuss. And from that perspective, definitely it's very important. And at the moment, I would like to thank organizers for putting at place this very interesting lecture and discussion, to thank our supporters, participants, and most of all, thank you, Airis, for finding time in your very busy schedule. And I would like to hope that you will be more often with us and you will share your thoughts on strategic concept, at least in a 1 year time. So thank you very much, Airis, and see you hopefully soon. Yeah, and thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.